Top 10 largest economies in Africa. List of the largest economies in Africa. Africa is an impressive continent that houses a number of countries. It is home of the black race as well as the second most populous continent across the globe. Africa's entire landmass stretches across 30.2 million square kilometers, and this makes it second largest continent in the world. In terms of the population, Nigeria is Africa's leading country, and this gives it the enviable title, the Giant of Africa. However, Algeria occupies the largest landmass, and this distinguishes it as the largest country both in North Africa and the entire Africa continent. In various times, South Africa had the highest GDP level, and this made it the biggest African economy. However, in 2014, Nigeria's volume of national production increased massively. This boosted the country's gross domestic product and gives it the influence to overtake South Africa and become the number one country with the African biggest economy. In that case, this very article presents you the top 20 largest economies in Africa. That is, top 10 largest economies in Africa. Before we continue, please, I will be very pleased if you subscribe, hit on that notification icon so that you get more notification when we upload more videos like this. Please do not forget to like, share. Thank you. Let's continue with the top 10 largest economies in Africa. Number 1. Oh my God, I'm sure you're going to like this. Nigeria. What has become of South Africa? Let us see. 1. Nigeria. Gross domestic product, $376.3 billion. Wow, that sounds interesting. Nigeria is one of the most influential countries not only in West Africa but across the entire African continent. With respect to its massive economic growth, Nigeria happens to be the country with the largest economy in Africa by gross domestic product. Although its economic development has not really proved stable, Nigeria continually maintains an increasing level of economic growth. In terms of population and economic growth, Nigeria has remained Africa's leading country years after years. In Nigeria, the practice of a mixed economy paves the way of economic contribution from both the public and private sectors. Besides that, Nigeria has a remarkable record in terms of the stock exchange, and this gives the country the second spot among Africa's largest stock exchange markets. For a period of 20 years, that is, from 1990 to 2010, Nigeria established a new base level for its gross domestic product, and consequently, the country achieves a massive increase of 89% in economic growth. Currently, Nigeria has the largest African economy, and it's expected to keep its economic growth at a fast rising pace in the coming years. Based on gross domestic product statistics, Nigeria is currently associated with a total gross domestic product of $376.3 billion, resulting from the enormous volume of national production. Nigeria's soaring economy is mainly favored by the country's vast deposit of natural endowments such as crude oil. Undoubtedly, Nigeria is one of Africa's biggest suppliers of crude oil, and by reason of this, earning from petroleum makes up the largest portion of Nigeria's economy. Although revenues are generated from various other key sectors such as manufacturing and agriculture, the petroleum sector remains the mainstay of Nigeria's vibrant economic system. 2. South Africa. South Africa has a gross domestic product of $349.3 billion, just behind Nigeria. South Africa is the second African biggest economy. In many aspects of development, South Africa has attained some impressive feats, and this makes it one of the most powerful African nations. In previous times, South Africa had better economic growth than Nigeria, but due to the quick pace at which Nigeria increased in national production, South Africa was eventually withdrawn from the topmost position. Although Nigeria maintained Africa's largest economy, many economic crises have argued that South Africa is Africa's best economy with regards to its favorable economic development. As an economic yardstick, per capita income is adopted in measuring economic development. Meanwhile, a favorable per capita income is an indication that there is a sustainable level of economic development. In recent moments, the unfavorable rate of the world's economic growth has had negative effects on the development of South Africa. Currently, unemployment is one of the toughest setbacks encountered by South Africa. Based on estimates, over 20% of the country's population is affected by the predominance of unemployment. South Africa has recorded an increase in its growth rate in the subsequent years. The country's growth only saw a 1.9% increase. Meanwhile, South Africa's gross domestic product is currently estimated at $349.3 billion. Let's go to Egypt. 3. Gross domestic product of Egypt, $239.1 billion. Egypt maintains the largest economy in North Africa, an African region dominated by Arabs. In 2013, Mohamed Morsi was ousted from presidential seat, and since this period, Egypt has remained in political instability. Egypt maintains only a 2% increase in economic growth. Egypt maintains a diversified economic system, and across the Middle East, the country is considered one of the biggest economies. At the moment, Egypt's overall gross domestic product of $237.1 billion makes it the third largest economy in Africa. Over the years, the Egyptian's gross domestic product has received massive contributions from key sectors such as industries, tourism, services, and agriculture. Regarded as one of the major contributors of gross domestic product growth, tourism is obviously one of the beautiful Egyptian features which attracts global interest. There are a significant number of tourist attractions in Egypt, and some of these portray ancient architectural designs. Coming the fourth position, Algeria. Gross domestic product, $178.3 billion. In terms of landmass, Algeria is the largest African country, and in the global ranking, the North African countries contain the 10th largest territory. Algeria was established to have maintained a fair increase of 3% in its economic growth. Meanwhile, this economic improvement resulted from the impact on the country's political stability. The Algerian economy was favored by a number of factors, including private demands and a high level of public investment. At the moment, the economy of Algeria is associated with an entire gross domestic product of $178.3 billion. Getting to the fifth position is Angola. Angola has a gross domestic product of $124.2 billion. Angola is the second biggest supplier of oil in Africa. For this reason, the oil sector forms one of the major contributors to the gross domestic product of Angola. Angola's economy was established to reach a 7.1% increase in the past. The country's gross domestic product was marked by a 1.5% increase. Some of the key sectors which brought about this economic growth were manufacturing, agriculture, construction, fishery, and non-oil energy. Currently, Angola's gross domestic product is valued at $124.2 billion. Standing at the sixth position is Morocco, with a gross domestic product of $109.8 billion. Morocco is one of the industrialized countries in North Africa. In previous years, the country's economic growth has been gradually at a 2.7% increase. However, in the subsequent year, Morocco advanced beyond this mark with a 4.7% increase in gross domestic product. As it stands, Morocco's gross domestic product is estimated at $109.8 billion. Coming number 7, Ethiopia. Ethiopia stands with a gross domestic product of $80.9 billion. Ethiopia is one of the most influential African countries, particularly in terms of military, history, and politics. Over the past 10 years, Ethiopia has been marked by a considerable growth level. The most significant point of this was the 2012-2013 fiscal year, during which country's gross domestic product has a 9.7% growth rate. Currently, Ethiopia's gross domestic product is estimated at $80.9 billion. 8. Kenya. Kenya has a gross domestic product of $79.5 billion. In 2011, Kenya was affected by a period of slowdown, and this had some negative impact on its economy. However, the government strove hard to restore its economic strength, and consequently, in 2013, Kenya experienced the growth rate of 5.4% increase, 4.3% increase, and 4.6% increase from the first, second, and third quarters respectively. What an improvement! Meanwhile, Kenya was able to recover its economic strength through vibrant activities in construction, tourism, agriculture, and financial intermediations. At the moment, Kenya's gross domestic product is estimated at $79.5 billion. This places Kenya at the 8th position among the countries with the largest economies in Africa. 9. Sudan. Sudan has a gross domestic product of $58.2 billion. Sudan saw a 3.6% increase in its real gross domestic product level, and this resulted from the favorable impact of two of the country's major sectors. In addition to the contributions from these two sectors, being agriculture and mining, Sudan was favored by transitional financial arrangements, a financial relationship with South Sudan, and the economic returns generated from all transit fees. Currently, Sudan's gross domestic product is estimated at $58.2 billion. The last but not the least, Tanzania. Standing at the 10th position with a gross domestic product of $51.7 billion, Tanzania is one of the vibrant East African countries. Its economy has been favored by a moderate growth rate of 7%. Meanwhile, the country's economy is vigorously supported by a number of vibrant sectors, including manufacturing, communications, construction, agriculture, transport, and intermediations. Based on the forecast, Tanzania's growth rate will be greatly favored by infrastructural investments. As it stands, Tanzania's gross domestic product, however, hovers around $51.7 billion. Meanwhile, Tanzania sits at the 10th position among Africa's biggest economic countries. Thanks for watching. Please do not forget to subscribe so that when next we upload a beautiful video like this, you will get feedbacks. Thanks.